Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. This is episode number 326. It's brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, and my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, fellow Americans. Happy
What did you-
Independence Day. Let me be the first one to tell you.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. 249 years.
Yeah. I think big celebration coming next year.
I kept thinking this morning it's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge. You might even see those military guys on Pennsylvania Avenue again.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in the 200th, right? We're so old. We remember the 200th.
Yeah.
The previous 50-year increment.
Yeah.
But Shreveport got a bunch of money from the federal government. There was a lot of money handed out to like build patriotic stuff to commemorate it, right? And they built a road that goes along the Red River. And they built parks along the road, and they built a concert venue that was like the stage and then water and then the crowd. It was like the stage was in the middle of a lake, sort of. And there were all kind of cool concerts and stuff there. It's kind of died out now, and the concert venue is not used anymore. And there's not the parks are so heavily policed that no one wants to go there. So they have no, so now it's just a road, and it's a handy road in Shreveport if know the geography of the place. All the other stuff they built has kind of gone to seed. It's kind of sad, but a lot of communities around the country got stuff out of this, and I bet that we're headed toward a round of legislation to do that too, and so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't go to really any July 4th parades, and I'm pretty sure that around here, and maybe where you live too, there's some local celebrations, some parades, and the various towns or cities or whatever are doing their own little thing.
What's really cool is there's a bunch of times, and I've gone to the Heritage 4th of July party, and it's on the roof, and it's not a great view of the fireworks on the mall because that's the way the smoke blows. So halfway through the show, you're seeing like glow in the smoke, right? Because you really don't see the fireworks anymore. But the coolest thing about it is you have a 360 view of the Washington area up there. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of fireworks shows around the Beltway that you can see from up there. And it's really cool. It's like each little town doing its own thing.
One year I did go and attend 4th of July thing on the roof of the Leadership Institute building.
Uh-huh.
Now, and they had, I guess the view was, I'm trying to remember, it's been a long, long time. I think the view was okay. I mean, now you're coming from it from a different angle because, Heritage is in DC up towards Capitol Hill, whereas, Leadership is in Arlington, technically, I guess.
Roslyn,
Arlington area. So they have a different vantage point there. But I think it's great when, these organizations can utilize a rooftop. The one thing I really remember, as a child or as a youngster, or I guess whatever, was when the Federal Reserve, where my father worked, had completed their new building. Okay. Once again, I don't know how many times I've railed on this show, as a part of my father's railing in his life about the size of federal government. But while he was working for the Federal Reserve, which had this magnificent building, that runs along Constitution Avenue, it's just, there are a lot of great buildings in DC, right? A lot of the government buildings are very historic. I mean, they're just these kind of monuments in and of themselves. But the Federal Reserve, being yet another government, kind of agency, they outgrew it. Why? I don't know really all the real reasons.
Yeah. Why do they need more people?
Yeah. But
you're doing a thing. Okay. And let's, without getting into the arguments, whether they should lower rates and all this, how did the need grow there? Right. How did the mission grow there? Because you're just doing one thing.
Yeah, no. I mean, and that's part of this. That gets it creeps. Government has this kind of, I don't know if you want to call it mission creep or whatever, but
Yeah,
it just continues to grow. It's like kudzu or something or other, it just never stops.
that's right.
And and so my father, I mean, this was the early 70s. So while they were building the other building, so the buildings along Constitution Avenue, they're not very tall. I mean, they're big, but I mean they're not like several stories high. That's just the
Right.
way the architecture is. But behind it is where the other building was, and so that was like a 13-story building. I think that's the maximum height in DC was like 13 stories, uh, and so and they
I
have they
remember
had
that,
they
yeah.
put they put their cafeteria, right on the roof area, and so we could go and right up there, and then if you get there early enough, you get a fairly good vantage point. So I was probably 13ish, 14ish, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 14. But and I know I've said this before. I remember being in that building that one and only time, and my main impression really isn't the fireworks and how great the Washington fireworks is, because that building is right behind the Fed building, which means they're right up on the mall. I mean,
Right.
they're
Yeah,
pretty
that's a
darn
good view there.
right. Yeah. So, but what is the impression I am left with? 50 some years later, it's the fact that in the lobby, that as we were walking to the front of the building, they had already partitioned off areas of there that were little cubicle offices. Okay. They were already, I guess, at capacity, and they started to use part of the lobby as offices. And, so this has been drilled into my head for over 50 years about the size of government. Okay. And it
Yeah.
hasn't gotten any smaller. This is just, this is, if the average person could see what I've seen or you've seen and things like this, I think they'd have a vastly different opinion about a lot of these things that happen in Washington. A lot of people don't care. They
Yeah.
just kind of get along and whatever. But it still gnaws at me today about that. It's like this was unnecessary. And as you said, why do they need more people? I mean, that was my father was like, why do we need more people? It's there attrition doesn't, that's like an evil word in the government, right? It's like don't let people leave and not fill their jobs,
Right.
right? Just keep
Right.
adding more jobs. But they're chasing money, right? They're chasing money in their budgets. They want to establish a new baseline. They want to get more money, yada 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 yada.
And that's it. Now Trump is disrupting that.
Right.
Right. He's firing people, cleaning out whole agencies. I guess they announced yesterday that USAID is out of business. They closed it completely down. And so
Yes,
they'll have
and the
to
liberal
add a few.
tears.
Yeah. They have to add a little bit of that back, right? Because some of it actually is beneficial.
Right.
But not much, very little. And it's easier to do it from another place and tightly control it. So somebody, but it's weird. It's like the thing about it is the reaction to someone finally looking at this and saying, do we need it? Right. It's been really eye opening, right? Because it's like they're hardcore. We don't want to know. We don't care. Right. We want it to stay corrupt and inefficient and bogged down with too many people. They want that. That's what they're for.
Right.
And they're like, well, you need their expertise. No, we don't.
Well, this is just showing, and then look, we know from the get-go that even at the current levels, government does not run efficiently, and they haven't really run efficiently for a long time.
Long time. Right.
Yeah. I'm not even sure when they ran efficiently, but probably maybe not even in my lifetime have they really run, what experts would call it efficient. But it sure has grown, in our lifetime. I mean, we're close in age, and so we've seen a lot. We're coming. You're coming from the South, and I was born here, but we're seeing the same things. You've lived here for a long time. You've seen it. You've been on the Hill. You've experienced a lot of what I've experienced overall, and it's amazing to see what has happened in this town, and how this goes on, and it's maddening. I think the insiders, like people like there are a lot of other conservatives like us that want something to be done about this, but it's like kicking a can down the road here. So somebody's interest here, somebody's interest there, and then it just, we just keep seeing, things happen. But my father, during the time that while the Fed was building this monstrosity of a building, in essence, they had to decamp to the Watergate building, of all places.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember his floor. He also hated, the other thing about that he hated over there was just the fact that you get off the elevator and the walls were all, what you were struck with was all the walls were painted yellow, like really bright yellow. So yet another memory I have of the Fed. I have certain little memories. I have a vague memory of visiting my father in the first in the first original Fed building when he was working there. Then I remember this whole fireworks thing, and then I also remember seeing him in the Watergate in between there. So there we didn't have take your sons to work day or whatever, back then.
Right.
Not that I think my father would have done it anyway. I mean, he was an economist working in Asia stuff, Japan and Korea, and then some things like this. He probably figured that was not going to be exactly thrilling stuff when you're dealing with monetary policy. What are you going to show your kid? It's like,
right.
And
my father was an electrician, and I had no business up there doing what they were doing.
Yeah, look, right. Sometimes the careers flow or the trades flow. Electricians, plumbers. Sometimes the kids pick that up, right?
Yeah. His father was an electrician,
right? Yeah,
and my brother worked with him a little bit, but he called me his useless child. I was okay with that.
Yeah. So you take my son-in-law. His father was a plumber, and they had their own plumbing business for a while, family plumbing business, and so each of the boys started to learn plumbing. But the business, there's ups and downs and stuff like that, running your own business, and he was kind of a large guy, and bending down was really bad on his knees and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not sure how good a businessman he was, but I know he was an honest guy, and the kids were doing. But I think one of the kids, is still running that business or some plumbing business along those lines, whereas the other kids, like my son-in-law, his brother, and another brother, they're all doctors of one sort or another, right? And I don't even remember. And he's one of like 8 or 9 kids, so I don't even know what the other ones are doing. But I think I know what about 4 of them are doing. So I'm not so sure what the other 4 are doing. And I think there are 2 girls in the mix. And
so he got an opportunity.
Yeah, they did. But one of the things is, I was about this is that with my son-in-law, even though he chose not to pursue plumbing as a career, and the fact of the matter is that he knows how to be a plumber. He knows he can fix things, right?
Right.
It's very expensive to, electrician and plumbers. They're not cheap when you hire them, right? I'm about to face that, here very soon. I've got a couple of, the toilets that have been in our house since day one, which was like year 2000. We've been here since 2004, and we wanted to replace them. Bought a couple of toilets, on sale at Costco, and they're coming in next week. And a friend of mine's got a licensed plumber. He's going to send them over. But, it's going to cost me for these 2 toilets for him to actually take the old one out, put the new one in, and then remove the old ones. You physically just take them away and dump them or whatever they do with them. It's going to cost me like $450, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to spend 10 hours doing this or something like this. This is something he'll be able to do in a matter of just a few hours, I think. So it's good money for them. It costs me a lot of money, but I don't have those skills. I'm completely useless in that regard. But that's the way the world kind of runs and kind of works.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So yeah, you and I are, as far as the trades go, probably not so good.
You're equally useless.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sometimes my wife is like, I think she probably wishes, like, why can't you just fix this?
Well, that all depends, honey. Do you want it actually fixed?
Yeah, that's right. Do you want it actually fixed? And so it's, I'm in the mode now of just kind of going through things and saying like, what things have gone wrong or have now failed or whatever that are minor annoyances, but probably ought to just get fixed,
Yeah.
And so, we're just kind of going through this little list, and there's still a few plumbing needs, and there's a couple of electrical things where one of our ceiling fans, the remote works, but the fan doesn't. It's like, I don't know what the dick, and I'm sure I surely have no idea what's going on between the two. So, things that we would like fixed, they're not life and death kind of things like that, but stuff that's just, you kind of want to put the house and get the house in order, more or less. Anyway, all of that stuff. I did want to say, did you get rain over there today or last night?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Can we call that a break in the weather a little bit?
Yeah. It's sunny today. It's out
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Well, I think we needed the rain in the sense of, we look at our grass and our flowers and stuff like that. It's just, it needs something, beyond just a little watering that we can do ourselves. It needed a good rainstorm to kind of, so it has something to soak up a little bit more.
I ran a 2-hour practice last night, basketball practice last night, and I bet an hour and 40 of it was absolutely pouring. I mean, the gym, I thought it was going to cave in. It's loud noise. And it's hard, like the girls lose focus, because they're like, it's a bad storm. It makes a lot of noise. So.
Well, but that's kind of almost the way I felt when I was in the old Gold's Gym I used to do, because it was in basically a building with like, metal roof and all that stuff like that. So when the rain and if you were in there and then all of a sudden you hit by a thunderstorm, you hear it.
Yeah, it's loud.
It amplifies, right? Yeah. All right. So we've had some news. Well, we'll tack the mega bill, the big beautiful bill. I don't know, what did Schumer get? He tried. I guess he stripped the big beautiful bill name or something like that. So just calling it the act. I don't. Not none of that really matters. I mean, this really trumps terminology anyway.
Right.
For the most part, what's important is to whether or not it gets passed or not. So, the Senate, we had to call in J.D. Vance to pass their version. Now it's back to the House. I see that Mike Johnson said he's not pleased with the changes, and there's already rumors floating about that. We've got several Republicans, not unsurprisingly, that don't like this version of the bill that they've narrowly passed initially. So I'm not sure where we're going with that. I'm not crazy about it. I mean, there's things, they've extended some things in the CHIPS Act, and they've done a few things that need to be done. They are reforming student loans,
right.
which is good. This is not try to make sure this is not a free ride for people, from the Obama era, but there are a bunch of there are carve outs, and there are other deductions and things like that. As I said, I've never been happy with the whole, expansion of the SALT cap and everything like this. So I'm not sure what the final version will be, but they're gonna have to figure out, what it'll take to get it over the finish line. When we've got some recalcitrant Republicans, in the mix on this point. I mean, how do you see this going down at this point? And is there any way that it can get to the president's desk in 2 days?
Well, see, I think that probably helps Mike Johnson, because it's like you don't really have time to get into a lot of heavy trading and horse trading and whatnot on this. The reality is, and I think most of members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, understand this. Like, they're not really voting for you. They're voting for you because you're more like Trump than the guy that you were running against. Right. I mean, that's basically where we are with Congress now for most people. Now, they may think otherwise, but the fact is, the country voted to be Trump aligned, right? Pretty convincingly. So I think when you look at Congress right now, and it's not a perfect bill. There's stuff in there I want out too, but you make the Trump tax cuts permanent. You add some other tax cuts. The thing is, there's less spending in it than there was before. You're going after Medicaid, Medicare fraud. There's some stuff in there that you're not going to get if you have to get 60 votes, and you need to get it, right? And so they may do another one. Of course, the one that um, makes me happy now is that both houses of Congress have both voted to defund NPR PBS, which I just hope that that doesn't get stripped out, because we shouldn't be paying to propagate views we don't agree with. And they've been warned and warned and warned to stop being so biased. And it's like, it was like the MRC to the deal, your guest, what the guests they brought on their news shows, it was like 470 something to 20 left would be right. So, you didn't even try, basically. So, you can now pay the price for not trying, right? And I don't blame them. Well, I do a little, but I don't blame them a whole lot for underestimating the threat here, because it's so many times that the right has tried to do this and not been able to. But it does look like it's lined up now to where it wasn't really that controversial provision in the legislation. So that I think that's a bright thing about it. They've been pretty good at pulling rabbits out of the hat. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And, you're right, that timeline is right staring us in the face. So, that could be a problem, that they have this goal. I always said, like, these artificial goals, like, we want to sign this by the 4th of July. Why? What difference does it make if it's July 8th, right? I mean, if you're working on it and you're trying to bring it to fruition, the exact date of 4th of July, that's like, Biden made the terrible decisions on Afghanistan, right? Which really cost him his presidency in a lot of ways, because he wanted to get it done before 9/11, right? It's not important. He was going for symbolic nonsense and ended up, really messing up with his ability to lead the country. So I think they'll pass it. I think it'll get worked out. I don't know if it'll make the deadline, but they're pretty close now. And there's always going to be complaints, and that's why we have conference committees. And I think that the thing that keeps the Republicans on board on this is, if you don't pass it, the Trump tax cuts expire, and everybody gets 18 to 22% tax increase. And I don't think anybody wants to be responsible for that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said it before. I mean, one of the things this does is that because the Trump tax cuts are set to expire, that has brought a lot of uncertainty into the whole market, and people aren't sure, and so you've got to figure this out. They do know that for a lot of Americans it would be paying more taxes if they do expire, and I think Trump is hell bent on making sure that doesn't happen, and then also giving people that he had promised a break. There's a lot of stuff in there that gives, he's making true on his promises on, the Social Security. I mean, it wasn't a direct, he doesn't have a direct thing about no taxes on Social Security, but he has additional exemptions for seniors, I guess it is, up to certain income limits that would help, it kind of deflect some of those expenses and everything. Yeah, this is Bob here.
Right, that's right.
Right, and I think I think this is correct. I mean, the timelines are artificial. I guess I kind of tend to believe that Trump set that as that he wanted to use Independence Day. I've signed this bill. He'll do whatever it is. It was going to be more of a marketing, almost promotion. Just kind of how he did. He waited till after April Fool's Day to start with his Independence Day or his Liberation Day. He gets this big, beautiful bill on Independence Day. It's a nice marketing promotion, whatever, kind of a thing. But in reality, it doesn't mean anything, whether or not it happens on the 4th or the 8th or the 20th or whatever.
Well, I mean, now it'll be a political talking point. It's like, right. You can't even meet his deadline. It's like the 34 felonies, it's just something they'll say every time. Doesn't matter. No one cares about the 34 felonies.
Which was all a bunch of baloney anyway, the way they structured that. So that's not even a true thing. Well, this big beautiful bill, which, like I said, there are definitely pieces in there which I'm not crazy about. I don't. It's not really that beautiful. But you may have seen these posts by Musk on that kind of relate to this. So let me add this one.
Yeah.
So this is one of the problems, right? I mean, this is national debt from 1900 to 2020. I mean, and it's gone. It just continues to go even higher. I don't know,
Well,
when or
no,
what.
no, no. It's not going higher right now. It's going down. We're collecting more money than we're paying out right now. Thanks to the
Well,
tariffs, thanks to this being the quarter that taxes are collected in. We actually have run through 3 straight months of surpluses.
yeah, but how long will that last?
Well,
That's the
it depends on
question.
how much tariff income they get. Like
Yeah.
they're getting a
Well,
lot more tariff income than they thought they would. They're up over like almost $150 billion now.
so we'll have to see what Trump does with these in the end. The tariffs have not done as much damage as I thought they would do at this stage, but they're still, we got to get past like July 9th. It's like, what's he gonna do after July 9th? That kind of, that
Right.
we still don't really know about this. But I'm kind of curious about your reaction to this. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna put Bob's up here first.
Yeah, that's right.
But here's another thing from Musk.
Yeah, it's like you have the debt you have to pay for Biden's 3 big spending bills. I mean, we borrowed the money. He's rescinding some of it, but they said they were going to spend that money and that we're committed to spending that money. So I mean, the debt ceiling is another artificial limit, basically, right? We just made that up out of whole cloth. But it does prevent them from printing money to willy-nilly to just meet every need. But yeah, it's yes, the debt is gonna, you got to deal with the debt. You got to deal with it. It's there. It's Biden's 3 big spending bills that were all over $1 trillion each and haven't generated any income or growth or prosperity. And that's been, nobody's been hooked up to broadband, all that kind of stuff. Those things have failed, right? Because you were getting government to run commercial stuff which almost never worked. And so, yeah, you're going to have to vote. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have borrowing authority, whether they like it or not. And, you can say we're doing better now and, we can come down next time. But right now you have to do it. And I know everybody will say, oh, you're just kicking the can down the road. Well, no, you're not. If you're collecting enough tariffs to run surpluses, you're not kicking the can down the road. You're trying to do something about it.
Yeah. Okay. So right now we'll have a budget surplus as the way that goes. But one of the problems we have is on the national debt is that we're paying interest on that debt.
Right.
And the debt, that interest is projected to hit, is coming close to $1 trillion.
Right. We're about to get to the point where we're paying more for interest than we are for defense.
Yeah.
If we're not there already. We're within a few days or weeks of that.
So you've got to run, a very large, budget surplus to even make a dent in the interest on the debt. Otherwise, the debt is going up.
That's right. And that's why that graph looks like it does.
Right.
It's because the interest is now so much a bigger part of the problem.
Yeah. But I mean, there was a period of time though where interest rates, had been in a very low period. I mean, they were relatively stable and low, so that the government wasn't. I mean, the interest wasn't huge, by today's standards. Plus, the debt was a lot less. I mean, I think weren't we railing about under Obama? It was something like 16 or 18 trillion back then, and now it's like double that or close to double that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a result of that, you're thinking like you added all that extra. We now have all that extra debt, and now we've got interest rates that are higher than they were before. It's not a good scenario. I mean, this is not something that is probably, unless we get, a huge bunch of courageous politicians or something, people are willing to take the knife to it, and do more doging like Elon Musk, was trying to get done here. You start cutting back agencies, or if not outright closing things that the government doesn't really need to be in. Just try to reduce the size of government and reduce our expenditures and do something about it. Otherwise, for whatever time you and I have left on this earth, this thing is probably just going to continue to grow.
Well, I think you could level it off, right? But it's going to take some dramatic steps, and I think our best chance is the next 3 years because you have a president who can't be reelected, right? So he can do whatever he wants, and you have a Congress that's beholden to him. So you may have some opportunity to do some breaking through on that. But that's the other thing, like he's after Powell about. It's like when it comes time to pay these T-bills, right? We're paying at a higher rate because he can't get Powell to lower the rates, even though the inflation is down back below 2%. So should he lower the rates? I don't know. I think probably it would help with this individual problem, right? Of interest rates on the debt, but there could be other factors.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what figure is below 2%. Every number I've seen, whether if it's PCE or CPI, is at 2.3 to 2.7, which is still, a little bit above the Fed's target range. Now, you can argue whether or not the target range for the Fed is too high. That your expectations have to be reset.
Right, but I mean, if inflation's down in that level and they're not moving, right?
They're not moving. They're not moving now, right? I mean, and look, I'm not an economist. I'm not going to second. I'm not going to second guess the Fed necessarily on this, but maybe they should be thinking about rate cuts at some point in time. But I think that I don't have a problem with them kind of waiting to see, are we going to get higher tariffs come July 9th and other things and see how that works out. And then say, okay, this actually.
But I mean, even if you get higher tariffs on July 9th, as you said, that like the estimates of the impact of tariffs are not accurate, right? I mean, everybody, it's going to kill our economy, and it hasn't killed our economy at all.
Yeah, I mean, so far, I mean, if we get through this next phase, and we've really not moved on the inflation front upwards, then I think that the Fed needs to look at doing something and making at least a little bit of an interest rate chop here, and that that'll help a lot of people along the way. It reduces our interest on the national debt, but it also reduces borrowing costs for homeowners, et cetera. And home sales are kind of in a funk, because mortgage rates have been stuck in that 6-7% range. So there's a lot of things
Powell could help with,
Yeah, right. And Powell's term comes up next year, and
yeah.
So Trump was already kind of trolling him with potentially selecting a shadow, chairman for the next term, which I'm not really crazy about that. I think you can. I'll let him jawbone Powell all the way through.
I'm for him jawboning. I don't know. You want to be structural about it, but right. I mean, he puts pressure on because I believe, I think it's kind of hard to make the case anymore that Powell is not doing what he's doing, at least in part for political reasons, right? He doesn't like Trump.
Yeah, well, they're definitely at odds, but there's definitely a hyped up politicization of things like this. I think the Fed has been trying to avoid it as much as possible, but Trump kind of draws you into the fight. Okay, look, he's good at drawing you into things. Okay, it's like the Fed had been able to stay away from.
If it's good Fed policy, to lower the rates, and I'm not saying that that it is. It could be. It looks to a lot of people like it would be, right? But if it is, and you're not doing it because you don't like Trump's, jawboning or whatever, then we need a new Fed guy, right? We need somebody that makes that decision of what's best for the economy, not on, trying to teach Trump a lesson.
But the decision is not solely his either. I mean, there's a committee.
Board of governors and all that.
Yeah, right. They have, and so they've got to get the other Fed governors who are on the voting rostrum this time around to agree with. So I think they're slightly moving towards that, but they're moving very slowly towards that. So they'll continue to be more Fed meetings, and we'll continue to read what the sentiment is, what the Fed Board of Governors is, and in terms of this and whether or not we're going to see a, maybe we'll get a rate cut in the fall. Maybe probably not likely this month, but maybe by September or something like this, we'll start to see this, and then see what happens with that. So we will. The next couple of days could be interesting, on the whole big beautiful bill. But I'm not holding my breath. He's going to get it there. But there are some Republicans who are probably going to use that deadline as a kind of, as they say, as a way. It's like, we need to try to get this done for the president by July 4th if we can. But the clock.
Right, and there'll be some people who use that to extract their demand, whatever.
Oh yeah. There's no doubt about that. All right. So the other thing too that we have is we had the Supreme Court. They finished off their term, and on Friday they issued a couple of decisions. One that affects Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live and where you worked for a number of years.
Yep.
And this has to do with the LGBTQ storybooks in the schools, for elementary schools. The school board apparently decided in 2022 to introduce several different books for reading for these elementary school age children.
And they said you can't opt out of it.
Right, but
that's what got them in trouble.
Right, well, this is what the problem was, that there wasn't as much objection when they introduced it, but a year later they said no opt out. There's no
excuse. A bunch of Muslim and Christian parents said, right. Whoa, we don't want this.
This was right. This was not just one. This is not just a bunch of right-wing conservatives. This actually was this was several religious parents, parents of different religions getting together and saying, no, stop this. What happened to this? I thought what was of course, Sotomayor and the liberal justices, because it was a 6-3 decision, they were like, oh, well, this will have a chilling effect.
That's exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah. But
you're getting there, sister. You're almost figuring it out. But yeah, I'm for him. I'm for it. That's what we're trying to get, is a chilling effect. But so what happened here is Montgomery County decided that it didn't have to listen to the parents. Right? We've heard your complaint. We don't care. Your kid has to do this. And they're like, you're not going to let us even opt out. And they're like, no, we know best. And so those parents sued and they won, so the Supreme Court said, the parents do get a say and stuff like that. And you can't tell them no. So it'll be interesting how that plays out in schools, because, this time it's, per books in the library, but it might be some other stuff next time. So, what point, are the parents, there's a line there to be drawn, right? And, now it'll have to be drawn, it's drawn down one side now, it'll have to be drawn down the other to kind of keep it in the middle.
Yeah, look, so as a student of a former graduate, a graduate of Montgomery County Public Schools, as the parent of 3 kids who graduated from Montgomery County Public Schools and went through this. Now, look, my daughter just turned 39, so it's been a long time, and my youngest son is 33, so it's been a long time since they were in elementary school. But when my youngest was in elementary school, they introduced some kind of sex ed course, and there was an opt out, for which my wife was right on it, and she opted him out. And he had one of his best buddies that said, you're lucky that your parents did that, because his parents didn't. And we were actually, in the same church. So you would think, but part of this was that parents weren't paying attention. They didn't know. Right. They just signed the sheets, permission slips, right? My wife, and so my son had an alternate coursework to do instead of that. And so I think he was much happier for that. One of the things here with Montgomery County is on the reasoning for this is just that they said that the excuses, all the excuse students, there had become so many that it was unworkable for the teachers, to set up a curriculum for this. I'm like, well, isn't that isn't that a signal, kind of telling you that there's some, if you've got a lot of parents that are opting their kids out, they're saying we want our kids excused from this. Doesn't that tell you something about maybe this is not a good idea to
don't do
have
it,
this?
and you won't have this problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Montgomery County is so liberal. They got their heads stuck in the sand, and they think that they can just run roughshod over
Right.
all the
They
parents.
don't think they have to listen to anyone.
Right.
We decide it. You just do it. Right. And that's the way, the left is about everything. Right. There's no discussion. They look how they pick their presidents. Right. They haven't honestly picked a candidate since 2008. Everybody else has been forced in and out. There's some questions about 2008. They pretty much told Hillary and Bernie to pound sand then. They were clearing the field for Obama.
Right. And it's the school board they've had an episode like something like this in the past. They had, I think, what was that? And see if you can. I don't know if you remember this or not, Brian, but it goes back probably to the early 2000s, maybe between 2000 and 2010. I can't remember exactly when.
During Reed's era.
But they had a thing there where they had instituted some kind of course, or they were, I guess, or maybe had to do with the student bullying about LGBTQ students or something like that. I think one student had accused other students of being bullied, and this created this whole mess. Anyway, the school board was trying to ramrod something through, and they had their lunch handed to them right there, because what happened was that when they had these hearings about this whole thing, they got flooded with Hispanic parents, who were normally part of their constituency on the voting side, who were like, but they were Catholic, right? Most of the Hispanic, students, they're like, no, it's like, we don't want this kind of teaching or whatever, to our children. And so they showed up. I mean, they showed up in such numbers. Now the school board, the hearing room and everything, it's not that big, but they had to set up a separate room so they could watch it like on closed circuit TV. Ana Sol Gutierrez was the school board president at the time. It was a mess, And
I'll never forget. I told when I was at the Montgomery Journal, Kermit Burnett. You remember him?
Oh yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, Kermit. He came in for a candidate interview, and me and Mark Tapscott talked to him, and he talked about bullying in schools, and he wanted to do this and that and the other. And he walked out, and Mark's like, it's good luck ever getting anybody to listen to that. My kid's been bullying in schools for 1,000 years. I don't think it's going to change. And I'm like, that's their next thing, right? Is getting on the bully. They're going to use that to put in all kind of other stuff that you don't want, right? And sure enough, they went right to work on the Ana Sol, Burnett. It was a big priority for Wiest, the superintendent. So without getting into the weeds of Montgomery County Public Schools, this is a school system. It is an arch liberal school system. It is popped up by millions and millions of dollars from some of the richest taxpayers in the country, right? So you have, and it has like 26 high school clusters, and about 3 of them are performing above the state level, right? So it's a very other than the 3, the ones with, all the two computers, multiple computers in the homes, high income people, it doesn't work, right? It's very, very top heavy. Far too many people making $100,000 for administrative jobs. The administration ratio to classroom teachers is one of the worst in the country, but they don't care, because they don't have to care, because they have zillions of dollars and they can pay to cover up any mistakes. And the arrogance is just unbelievable, right? And so now the only way to get them is this kind of stuff. And this was a big decision, because this says, parents do have rights in all the school systems. And, you can bet that there's people in Montgomery County that's not the only grievance they have with MCPS. So you're about to see some more of that.
Yeah. And, this may wake up some of the parents that, had not really paid attention to this issue, saying like, whoa, it's like, what the heck is this doing in elementary schools to begin with? Right? It's like,
exactly.
Right. It was, I had a big enough problem that you were doing sex ed to my fifth grade kid, way back, because we didn't get that in my day until we were in seventh grade or something like that, seventh or eighth grade. So now you're doing this because this is all indoctrination. This is all this is about. It's all indoctrination.
Yeah.
By the left, by the liberals. All right.
You got to fight it every step. Go ahead. You're going to go more Supreme Court, right?
Right. More Supreme Court. The other one, birthright decision. This is an interesting decision because the court didn't strip away the opportunity for people who oppose the administration's efforts to get rid of birthright citizenship, but they said you have to sue as a class or do these other things, but you can't. All these injunctions by judges across the country,
district judges, so you can't have nationwide injunctions issued by district judges anymore. The judge can only rule what goes on in his district, his or her district. So that's a good, that's another one. It could end up working against you, but it gotten to the point where the abuse was so rampant that they were trying to. They don't have Congress, as we talked about earlier. Trump does manage to get these bills across the finish line when no one thinks he can. So between Trump and Mike Johnson and John Thune, something will happen in the next few days, one way or the other. So it's hard to stop him right now, right? He has a lot of momentum. He's riding high in the polls. He's good on all the issues. They don't really have a person who speaks against him very effectively. So, their redoubt has been to stop him in the courts by judge shopping, going and finding places where the judges are real far to the left and getting those judges to, issue nationwide injunctions that stop the whole thing. Right now, Trump has to go back through there and win him on appeal. And he's, his record on appeal is unbelievable, right? Because so much of what these district judges have done has been clearly illegal, and they probably knew that beforehand. Although, I watched these videos on Facebook of John Kennedy, the senator from Louisiana, grilling judicial nominees, and they may not know, right? The things that he asked them, what is Article 3? Well, I'm not sure. If you don't know what Article 3 is, you ought not be a judge, right? You need to understand that, but they don't know, right? He's like, well, it wasn't coming up in my practice yet. Okay, well, now it would, and you don't know what it is, So, I think part of that is, part of the downstream effect of that is they don't really understand the limits of their power, So now if you can just say, I can shut the whole nation down doing this, and I'll be popular with all my leftist friends like Jim Boasberg downtown, then they will do it. And so now the court's saying, inferior courts cannot shut down stuff nationwide. They can only deal with what's in their district. So that puts a lot of shackles on them. I don't think it finishes them. They're pretty clever over on that side too. So they'll come up with some other tactic, but that was they've shot down one major tool the left has used to try to slow down Trump.
Yeah, I'll say Senator Kennedy. He always cracks me up. I mean, the things that he says and he does, and how he just puts a lot of these people that are in these hearings on their heels. It's magnificent. I mean, he just pins them back, and they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's usually he's quoted, "You wrote this. Did you write this? Did you mean it?" And it's pretty funny.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing in that sense of the word. Yeah, I mean, this is something that by getting this done, I mean, this probably smacks down the left. I don't know what the effect is. I haven't studied or looked back to see how many times conservatives have tried to use the same tactics, but it probably hasn't been anywhere near as effective because a lot of the courts tend to lean left. We've had Trump got a lot of judges approved, but it's. I think the left has used this more than the right has.
Yeah, well, we used it we were trying to get the FBI to stop ordering big tech firms to censor conservative content on the internet, right? anything that was against the government line on COVID or global warming or whatever, the government would go straight to the or Biden would go straight to the social media companies and say to pull down tweets. Don't sell they went to Amazon and said, don't sell books that are about COVID that are not, don't support our views on it and so forth. So, I mean, it was all kind of stuff they did like that. So, we went to court to try to, the right went to court to try to stop this. I guess it was Mike Davis, MMDA, the thing he runs, that did this. And they found a judge in Rayville, Louisiana, who wrote them a terrific opinion. But as it went up the chain of command, and the Supremes ended up keeping some of it and setting aside some of it. So they said, it is worthwhile, for instance, for the FBI, sees someone promoting prostitution or human trafficking on the internet, they should be able to stop it. They should be able to take action against it or whatever. So, which was kind of viewed as a loss, because if those channels of communication are open, they're going to get used, right? So
what do you see happening to birthright citizenship? Do you think Trump can modify it, or somehow figure out a way to do something different, or what? How?
Well, I believe the way the law is written, it can be repealed. That part of it can be repealed, and constitutionally, I don't know if that's what they'll do, though, right? I really don't. I don't really have a good read on what'll happen legally there.
Yeah, I mean, it may take some time before we see some clarity on this.
Yeah,
one way or the other. But
see, that case is not before the court.
Right.
There's nobody in the court challenging Trump's ban on it right now. There will be, I'm sure, but not right now.
Right. Okay. Another thing here too. Well, yeah, real quickly, just because we were talking about trade. So Trump has been trying to deal with Japan, and I'm half Japanese, so I was kind of. But Japan has been pretty firm about letting American cars into their market. I hadn't really thought about it, but having been in Japan, I'm thinking when you're overseas, you don't see a lot of American product in some of these Asian countries, and particularly Japan. So that Japan has always been very protectionist about some things.
Right.
And so he looks like he may slap a 35% tariff on Japanese products. But Japan's holding firm. But considering how quickly Canada kind of caved on that whole, those taxes, what was that those taxes on the big tech companies,
Mm-hmm.
They were holding out, and then Trump's like, oh, forget it. It's like I'm calling off here. I'm calling off these talks, and the next thing the tax
we're reconsidering on that. Yeah, I saw that.
So I'm just kind of wondering how long Japan can really hold out, along these things, because this has been a much more surprising to the upside than I ever expected this to be. To be honest. So 35% tariffs. Looks like it'll hit probably. Do you think
for Japan temporarily? I think they're going to make a deal. I mean, I think all these things people realize. Trump is serious, and B, it hurts you more than it hurts him, and C, no one's going to stop him from doing it. So if you're dealing straight up, it's your choice. But
when you look around and you've seen the negotiations that he's had with other countries, and how they've come to the table and modified and agreed to certain things that were not in place before before he slapped all these huge tariffs on initially. Are you the guy who wants to be in the room saying I defied Trump, on this because I think it was in our best interest, but then you start watching potential business flow everywhere else?
Right. That's right.
I don't know.
People can. It's a tax. No, it's not. It's an access fee. It's a market access fee.
Well, that's what he's kind of turned it into. I mean, at least.
Yeah, and we have the most valuable market in the country, so why not?
All right. As we round the corner here real quickly, Tom Tillis, Don Bacon, not going to run for re-election. Is this another thing here where Trump's had the MAGA effect on these guys?
That's right. I think that, Tillis was elected before Trump. And I think that he's to the point now where he won't be able to raise any money if he runs again. Right. Trump just dries up your spigot. You can't get any access to any money. Bacon's a little tougher deal because his district is a close district. We may not, as Republicans probably going to win the Senate seat in North Carolina now. Republican Party, North Carolina is screaming toward the Republicans. It's voter registration. It's still slightly in the favor of the Democrats, but it's been reduced by more than 1 million in the last 3 years. So, Republicans have all the momentum in North Carolina, and she would win that. I guess it's going to probably end up being Laura Trump would win convincingly if it was held today.
Okay, so that leads into the question I have. So, should Laura Trump run, and is she eligible to run, or will she make herself eligible to run?
Is she? I guess she'll move there. Yeah,
that's what she would have to do. She's a native of North Carolina, right?
Right.
So she has some roots there. But she'd have to decide to move there, I think, by September in order to qualify to be on the ballot. So that there's not a whole lot of time. I mean, we're just entering July, so she's got a couple of months, give or take, to make that decision. That would be interesting. I don't know. I wasn't crazy about the whole thing when they threw her name up there in Florida. North Carolina, I don't know. It almost intrigues me as if she.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
Yeah,
it's more of a doable deal.
Yeah, and they would, but those decisions need to be made fair. You kind of want to be able to know who your candidates are sooner or later. So she's going to have to make that decision whether or not she wants to get on that ballot, so that the Republicans can decide who they're going to put up there. I mean, if Laura Trump declares, I would think that most Republicans will just make way for her at this point.
Yeah, I think so too.
Though I think I heard that the former governor, the Democratic governor, I guess he's considering a run for Senate. Yep, Cooper.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, he's won statewide elections.
Yeah.
So that would be. I don't think they have a lot of momentum for his type of politics in North Carolina, but we'll see.
Okay, your quick take on Trump winning again against the media, the settlement with CBS, Paramount.
I think that's a good thing because I think that networks need to be told that you chop these things up to make the answers not reflect the answers the candidate gave for electoral advantage because you hate the other candidate, and you present that as truth. There ought to be a penalty for that, right? They presented what she said as what she actually said, and they had doctored it so she didn't look like an idiot. And the proof was overwhelming, or they wouldn't have threatened, right? And so someone said, I read today, there's some merger they're trying to do, and they're trying to get Trump to go along with the merger. But they defrauded the American public here, and someone called them on it. And what happened there is really, really important in terms of there's now a pretty stiff financial penalty for manipulating interviews, lying about what people said.
Yeah, so as I understand, the settlement is like $16 million for lawyers' fees and the contribution, I guess, to his future library. But Fox News had reported that this could be worth as much as $30 million because they have to do some ads and some other things. This is kind of remarkable. I mean, not only, I mean, he's being these media companies and collecting money from them, but he's also done similar things with law firms, right?
That's right.
And he's gotten these law firms to cough up money, and they're going to have pro bono services and all kinds of things. I've never seen anything like this in my life, and I don't think I'll see anything like this again.
Colleges bending the knee. You saw Penn took Leah Thomas's medals. Columbia has bent the knee. There's a story on the front page of the Washington Post that, hey, Harvard, our resources are not limitless. We're going to have to think about what to do here, which means, somebody down there is trying to figure it out too. So, they're seeing it. He's serious. Right? He's doing more than any president has done about this stuff in a long, long time.
For the University of Pennsylvania, they could have saved themselves all this hassle if they hadn't done this to begin with.
Right.
they put this man child, whatever, let this male swimmer swim in the women's team, and then beat all the women, set all these records and whatnot, and create all this controversy, and it cost them. And now they've got their tail between their legs, because it's like, not only have they banned transgender from the women's sports, but they're also apologizing to all the women who lost out because of this whole Leah Thomas fiasco. I mean, this is embarrassing. I mean, this is completely embarrassing to the Ivy
carried away
League.
on your wokeness, and you're paying the
Oh
price.
yeah, yep, you're right. You're right. Okay, so even though we're at the time limit here, I got to end with Bobby Bonilla Day every July 1st. So we're on, we're day past that, just because we're sports fans. We love this. This is like one of the greatest days in sports, because it is just so funny. Here he's collecting, what is it, $1.2 million every July 1st
until through 2038, every year on July 1st. So he signed this contract, and they said, you were going to pay us so much now, and we're going to give you $1 million a year, which is, plus interest, till 2038. Is that right?
2035. So here's yeah.
So every year this guy just gets $1 million.
Right, and he hasn't. Okay, and remember, he hasn't played since what, 2016,
something like that. Yeah.
Right. So here's the thing about it. As I was reading about this, I haven't really read much about this until today, and it's just, so the Wilpons, who owned the Mets, when they got him, they owed him like $5.2 million, and the Wilpons, being the Wilpons, and they were heavily involved with the Bernie Madoff thing. They said, "Oh, we're going to, we don't want to pay you the $5.2 million that we owe you, because we're going to cut you, but we'll just give you like this annuity, this insurance policy," because they thought they could easily make that money and then more. Then the whole Madoff, the whole Bernie Madoff thing, was a Ponzi scheme. The Wilpons, lost a ton of money, but they're on the hook for like $30 million to Bobby Bonilla. Bobby Bonilla is like, what great. I mean, the guy he's like how old is Bobby Bonilla now? I don't even know.
He has a son graduating from college. He's in his 50s.
I think, yeah. So I think he collects this until he's like 68 or something like that, or whatever it is. So anyway, so here's a guy that he doesn't have to work a day in his life if he doesn't want to, because he's got that. Now, Chris Davis, who lastly played for the Orioles, and him too. He's collecting, I think, apparently he's collecting something similar. But these kind of payments are not new. It was kind of different at Bobby Bonilla's day, to do something, to do the deferred money to that extent. Now this is fairly standard procedure, right? Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, not 25 years in most cases.
Not 25 years, but I mean, but there's big money going to be involved, because Shohei Ohtani, most of his money's deferred. You've got, Freddie Freeman's going to get, he's going to be fine. Mookie Betts. I assume there's some, and I assume there's a lot in Juan Soto's contract too. So where you've got deferred money, and that'll be wrapped into something similar like this. But it's just, it's just utterly amazing to this. But so now even Steve Cohen, who owns the Mets, is like, happy Bobby Bonilla Day. What's the guy going to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's set up. They invested it. It's a result of an investment. They've got some dead money, but it's not really costing them a ton of money anymore.
Well, I mean, but I mean, you can't. The thing is that you put $5.2 million into Bernie Madoff, you lost it.
Yeah,
that was the problem. There's like you now owe this guy till 2035, and you lost most of, if not all, the money you put in there to pay him.
So then I have to tell my Bobby Bonilla story. So years ago, the Mets called up a pitcher named Billy Pulsiver, who was from Fairfax. So I went up to cover the game. It was major league debut, and I was blessed that he started against the Astros. And not only that, in the first inning of the game, he gave up 5 runs. So the Astros won easily. But then he had a decent outing after that. He just sort of, got caught up in the moment, and then he did okay for 4 or 5 innings. So it was a fairly decent story. So I go to the locker room after the game. And the other thing that happened in that game is Bobby Bonilla was called out on strikes, and he didn't think it was a strike. So he took his bat back into the locker room, and you can find film on this, video on this online, and beat up all the water coolers, just pounded on the water coolers. They're all flying around the dugout, a couple of them even out on the field, and so we go to the thing, and it's 45 minutes. I'm standing there waiting to ask Dallas Green, the manager, about Billy Pulsifer, because the first 44 minutes were the New York media talking about Bobby Bonilla smashing the water cans, right? It was a warm Saturday afternoon, too. I guess the Mets are probably pretty thirsty by the end of the game.
I'm going to have to go look for that right after the show here. Just...
Yeah.
All right, everybody. This was great. I hope you enjoyed it. My intent was never to go quite this long, but when you're rolling, you're rolling. So anyway, as always, please stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world, especially since we're about to celebrate July 4th. Go out there and have a great time. Grill some hot dogs, hamburgers, spend some time with your family, celebrate this wonderful nation, and plan your 250th next year, because like I said at the beginning, it's going to be huge. Yep. With President Trump, it's going to be something else. And as always, just God bless America, and we will see you again next week. Should have brought out a flag.